Planet Zoo enables you to build some crazy things, but sometimes you need to get real. I'm ZSH Plays, and today we're going to be looking at my 10 favourite real-life habitat recreations, each of which I visited and filmed IRL, so we can compare the real habitat with Planet Zoo and maybe learn something. Let's go! Our first habitat is the birdhouse at London Zoo. This is pretty much the first thing I ever tried to recreate in Planet Zoo. We're going to see a lot more intricate builds later on, but I thought this was worth including just to show how you can build a pretty decent representation of a real habitat without much in the way of crazy skills. This is almost entirely built from the classic red brick set and some of the other pieces in the classic set in the game. I'd only just learned how to take things off the grid when I started building this, so it just goes to show you don't need a huge amount of experience in Planet Zoo to start building stuff that looks decent. These days the real one has a walkthrough bird exhibit in it. That was way beyond my skills when I built this, so I built the inside as it was when the building was first built. A much simpler selection of aviaries, and it still looks pretty nice. The floor is just one of the paths from the Africa pack, and pretty much everything else is the classic glass and classic brick pieces. Let's move on to something a lot more complex. Singapore Zoo has given a lot of inspiration to this channel. This is the saltwater crocodile habitat at San Bernardino Zoo, which is a recreation of the gharial habitat at Singapore Zoo. It's got a really long viewing window which you can walk all the way down, and that was a big influence on a lot of the habitats at San Bernardino. I switched the gharials for saltwater crocodiles so it would work nicely in our Australian area, but aside from that, this is pretty much a direct recreation of the original habitat. It's a nice seating area so you can take a load off while you look at the gharials. I really wish we had free swimming turtles and fish that we could add into the habitat just to bring it to life a little bit more. Maybe one day in Planet Zoo 2 we will have the facility to do that, but I was really pleased with the habitat even without those. Next up, a much lower budget habitat for a much cuter animal. It's the red panda at Yorkshire Wildlife Park. I got the chance to go inside this habitat and feed the red pandas. It was absolutely amazing, and as soon as I got back I got to work on recreating their habitat as exactly as possible in Planet Zoo. I wanted to really test the climbing capabilities of the pandas and see if we could get them to climb around and use a feeding platform exactly as they do IRL. I made just a little one-off video with this habitat in it. It's not in any of our zoos. I was really pleased with the final result. The only real difference is that I had to make the feeding platform much larger so the keepers would actually put food on it so we could get the pandas on there. The best thing about building one-off habitats, just look at that frame rate. Next up is one of my favourite habitats I've ever seen in a zoo, the mixed cheetah and black rhino habitat at Zoo Leipzig. We just saw this on the Belmont Zoo tour, so I'm going to try and give you a new perspective on this today. Normally when you see it, I've got the rhinos on the left hand side where you can just see one there, and then the cheetahs on the right hand side, which is where they spend the majority of the time. But for this I've opened the gates so that they can be mixed wherever they like. The viewing in this habitat's amazing. We're so close to the cheetahs here, and then you can just see a rhino behind a bush away over there. And then as I was watching, one of the rhinos came round and walked right past the cheetahs. Through the side of the habitat they tend to spend most of their time, and then through the gates that join it into the part of the habitat where the cheetahs tend to spend most of their time. I love the rock work in this habitat. I went with a different colour scheme for the habitat here so it tied in nicely with the rest of the African area at Belmont Zoo, but just rock walls everywhere and no visible barriers aside from the rocks works really well right up until you get to the end of the habitat here where there is a gate where I believe the rhino can also go into the larger savanna next to it. But when you can see them both at the same time in the same habitat, it's a really amazing view and a pretty unique one. There's something about the way the light hits this habitat that always makes me happy. Time to move on to the oldest build that you're going to see today. This is the gorilla house at London Zoo. It was one of the most innovative zoo habitats ever built, although as we will see it is very much not suitable for gorillas, and they haven't kept gorillas there since about the 1960s I think. Its white concrete modernist construction was an enormous influence on all my early builds. I just love the aesthetic. I originally built this in London Zoo 1985, and then later on we moved it into Tecton Zoo and had black and white rough lemurs in here. It might not be big enough for gorillas, but with an indoor and an outdoor area it's certainly big enough for the black and white rough lemur. London Zoo doesn't keep any animals in here anymore and the indoor area is blocked off, but we can get a peek inside there in our recreation, which was based on how it stood back in the 1990s. Next up, something much more modern, the Asian elephant habitat at Chester Zoo. Just look at this little guy walking along. This is a pretty good sized habitat for a city zoo. Now, it was a big influence on the habitat that we built for them at San Bernardino Zoo, especially the waterfall with the stacked rocks. That's one of my favourite little bits of recreation we've ever done on the channel, I think. You can't always build an exact recreation of the habitat that you're looking at because often you want to fit it exactly in your zoo, make it make more sense. But the rock work and the water features were a big influence, and then I just kind of changed the shape of the habitat and made it work in a different way to fit the very long space that we had here at San Bernardino Zoo. The building you can see in the background is influenced by their building in Chester Zoo as well, although in Chester Zoos you can actually go inside and get more views of the elephants in there, along with a few other suitable species. But with the layout of San Bernardino Zoo, that didn't really work. There was no way to get the guests over to that side. Instead, we built a forest in between the bull part of the habitat and the cow part of the habitat, which is a nice feature I got from another zoo, I think in Korea, if I remember correctly. Always fun to mix two different zoos' habitats. Back at Singapore Zoo, we've got a real challenge. This is probably my favourite habitat at the zoo, and trying to recreate it in Planet Zoo, especially in franchise mode, was not easy, but it is the Fragile Forest, a walkthrough for Himalayan flying foxes, the largest bats in the world, and various other animals like mouse deer, sloths, and saki monkeys. I knew we didn't have most of those animals in the game, but I really wanted to get the bat part of the habitat with amazing views like this. In order to do that, we used two of the spectacled flying fox walkthrough exhibits, one at the level of the guests and one way up in the air with all the paths hidden in the branches of the trees, and that enabled us to get as close as possible to amazing views like this. The Planet Zoo habitat's not as good. Like I say, this was a real challenge, but we do have bats flying all around you on the path, and you can look up to the ceiling and see the bats right up near the roof of this huge indoor jungle flying around. I didn't put the sloths into the San Bernardino Zoo habitat because we already had them in the zoo, and we now have saki monkeys in the game as well. So I'm thinking of actually redoing this habitat and trying to get it even better than this with all three of those animals in there. Let me know in the comments if you'd be interested in seeing that or not. I'd be curious to know. You can see a sloth and the gorgeous Finlayson's squirrel here, and seeing this, I am really tempted to revisit this habitat. Time to leave the lush jungles of Singapore and head to the rocky cliffs of Prague. This is the Himalayan Tahr exhibit at Prague Zoo, one of the most impressive uses of natural rockwork that I've ever seen in the zoo, and one of those habitats where as soon as I saw it in the zoo, I knew we had to make it in Planet Zoo. The zoo we were building in San Bernardino didn't happen to have a giant cliff running all the way through it like Prague Zoo does, so I decided to go with a more man-made look, but still try to get the huge amount of verticality in the original habitat as best we could here. The key with this is to make sure that in and amongst all the jagged rocks, you have enough flat rocks that the animals can actually traverse it, and the sheep here are able to get all the way to the top of that rock face. How gorgeous is this? One of the most beautiful old habitats I've ever seen in the zoo, the birdhouse at ARTIS in the Netherlands. Been wanting to recreate this ever since I went there a couple of years ago, and the advent of the ocelots in the America's Animal Pack gave me sort of the perfect opportunity to build this. I mean, really it needs birds, but I figured a small, secretive cat that likes climbing and hiding would do quite well in a very thickly planted building like this. And I really went to town on the recreation of it, because when the original habitat is this beautiful, you really need to up your game. This is almost entirely built out of mesh and the tiny little metal pieces that were added in the America's Animal Pack, which is very apt seeing as that's the pack that caused this to be built in the first place. They are such amazing pieces, and I rarely build a habitat without them now. Time for my favourite real habitat recreation of all time, and a little bonus habitat after that as well. Penguin Cove at Singapore's bird paradise. Not only is this one of the best habitats I've ever seen, I think it is the best recreation we've done on this channel. It was an absolute nightmare to build. Getting the underwater right, getting the levels of penguins from swimming around on the ground floor to seeing them above and underwater on the top floor, the little islands of snowy rocks that they live on, the Northern Lights display on the ceiling, and my favourite feature of the habitat, which we'll see in a second, which is how the penguins can swim from underwater up through holes in the rock onto land and just kind of pop up onto the beach like they do in real life. It's definitely one of the most complex builds we've ever tackled on the channel. Here's the penguins popping up through the water. How amazing is that? And here they are doing it in Planet Zoo. Not quite as cool. I spent so long trying to work out if there's any way that you could hide the enrichment item they jump through in the rocks, but it just needs way too much space to do that. But it's still really cool watching them do that from here. That's my favorite recreation, but there was one more thing I wanted to show you. It's a lot simpler, and it's also in Singapore. It's the Komodo dragon habitat at Singapore Zoo. Basically just a pile of rocks and some plants, but I was desperate to recreate this where the Komodo dragon climbs up onto those rocks and basks on top of them. And after a lot of playing around with hitboxes, traversable area and rocks, I managed to get the Komodo dragon to be able to walk up a little hidden path behind those rocks and just sit there looking majestic and surveying the guests while the guests survey him. Ended up being one of my favorite shots in any series that we've done so far. And those are my top 10 +1 recreations. Thank you so much for watching as always, and I'll see you again next week for some more Planet Zoo.